paging Dr. Brown.
People being late makes me nervous. Well, people in general, but late people, they got me. I'm trying to stay calm. Well, I'm 15 minutes early, so technically he's not late, but still. Let's see. Door, window, white wall, painting, lamp, floor, chair, outlet, window, desk, aloe plant magazines, another brown chair, hand sanitizer. I use that to ground myself. I have little tips and tricks I help myself use to get from one devastation to the next. I started therapy when I was 6 years old, so I'm kind of a veteran in the psychiatric field. I thought the reason I was enrolled in therapy so young was because I had an unhealthy fear of trolls. Turns out that wasn't it. I recently asked my mom what the reason for starting so young was, and she said, "You know, it was really weird. When you were little, you had this constant fear of someone breaking into the house and killing me. So strange." Naturally, because of this, I slept on my parents' floor for months at a time. Whether they liked it or not, I would end up there. They do the whole bedtime routine thing, tuck me into my own bed, and when night struck and everyone was asleep, my body would wake me up and tell me to go to my parents' room. I never had any reason to believe bad things were going to happen to my mother. Nevertheless, the fear persisted. Weird how I placed my memory on something else. My anxiety and OCD have always gone hand in hand. Obsessive thoughts are a daily for me. Maybe it's what makes me so motivated. My constant obsession with success and outcome. My fixations continue. I have this memory from 5th grade of a friend turning to me in my kitchen and asking why I was yet again washing my hands. As I stood before the double sink, hands covered in dish soap, I had the realization that I had not finished washing my hands 5 minutes before. Now this became a problem. Anytime I saw a sink, I would stop and mindlessly wash my hands. They became so dry that my skin started to crack and bleed. My parents had to put me to sleep with gloves on, hands covered in Neosporin. And once the therapist dug me out of the hand washing phase, my compulsion moved to something else. This is what I later learned to be called an addiction transfer, which is so much more complicated than it sounds. Before surgery, I was addicted to food. After surgery, I'm still addicted to food. For a while after my procedure, I was trading my compulsion, my obsession, my whatever you want to call it, for restrictive eating. This was accompanied with a monomania with weighing myself. If you can't tell by now, I have a little bit of an extremes issue. I had a therapist once named Deborah, nice lady, who told me I allow things and people to have power over me when I choose to live in the black and white. Cute advice, but I find it hard to live in the middle ground for any of my habits. Complete restriction or free range. Sober or wrecked, I get caught in this riptide of thoughts, constantly tumbling impossible outcomes. This leads to feelings of guilt, uncertainty, and naturally feeling overwhelmed. Overwhelmed's a word I find myself using a lot. This is my first post-op appointment, actually. I wonder if he's upset. Is my blood work bad? What if I gained back all the weight I lost and my mind just blocked it out? I don't know, but I'm bad at waiting. Before I had bariatric surgery, I would eat anything and everything. Didn't need to wait for hunger. Oh, you're not gonna finish that? Let me help you type shit. Now, I had surgery in my junior year of college. To be frank, it saved my life. I had insomnia and sleep apnea. I was pre-diabetic. I have PCOS, a disease that actually prevents people with ovaries from losing weight. That is one of the actual side effects. Unreal. The odds were stacked against me for any other options, and I felt ready to take that step in my life, to finally put my health first. I had something called gastric sleeve. This is where they remove 80% of your stomach, leaving you with a tiny tummy that needs to be fed every 3 hours in 1-cup portions. Seems incredibly tedious, I know, but for me it became a lifestyle change. A brutal and emotionally draining one, but one I desperately needed. Now, this surgery, like most major surgeries, does not go without risk. But I was finally willing to take that chance. I feel like most people's relationships with food are complicated. I myself have more food drama than any other type. And I recently read a book that highlights why we turn to food for lack of love. Number 1 assessment says we turn to food to fill for a lack of love from someone. From ourselves, from someone else, whoever it may be. We make ourselves full until the voice is silenced. Bit hungry, actually. Skip breakfast to keep the number down for this one. All right, let's see. 16 grams of sugar. It's become almost second nature since my surgery to check sugars first, then protein. 8 grams, that's useless. 28 carbohydrate. Should have gone with the Cliff Bar. Nevertheless. Just gonna suck on it. I've got soft teeth from medication I took as a child, so too much crunch hurts the pearly whites. The last night I could eat normal food, I called upon a few chosen friends for a last supper. I go back and forth with the group about wanting biscuits and gravy, a true delicacy I'd no longer be allowed to have. But no one was in the mood for subwaying the party to the Upper West Side. I was so insistent that this was my only wish. Tears sneak out of my eyes as I agree to stay local. To this day, I don't know what it is about food that brings tears to my eyes. Could be the other power it has. Maybe the sex appeal? Nonetheless, we find ourselves ordering soggy Mexican food in the East Village. I'm eating so fast I can hardly taste the asada. Crunching down chips, waving the basket at the waiter, asking for a quick refill. We're drinking, having a few laughs as a friend raises his glass of tequila to me. To your health, Taco. Everyone drinks. On the way home, I stop into the deli that I will miss. Feeling like I'm getting my last rites, I grab something sweet and something salty. The combination only God herself could bring to this earth. I'm opening the honey bun before I even leave the register, shoving it into my mouth as if to prove it was mine. I'm an Olympic athlete, carb loading before the final sprint. I wake up the next morning covered in Cheeto dust and wrappers. This wasn't unlike any other morning. My anxiety makes the beginning of the day detrimental. I wake up with a gasp and suddenly thoughts flood my brain of what I need to get done. 'Cause I'm having a good time, having a good time. The panic sets in. Before I'm even out of my pajamas, I'm calculating how long it's going to take to get me from job 1 to job 2 and home. Did I finish that thing my boss asked me to do? Do I have to touch the poles on the train? How many calories are in that one muffin I want to get from that one bakery? What if I lose my job? Fuck! It's clearly too much. Every morning there is an iteration of this, and every morning it is, say it with me folks, exhausting. Yes. I have a very specific morning routine. I wake up having a panic attack, I take my meds, take care of the hygienics of the day, and next comes eyebrows. I zero in on making them similar. Sisters. not twins. I then move my party to the kitchen where I prepare breakfast and pack lunch. Scrambled egg whites with mushrooms and turkey, gotta pack that protein. I make some coffee and migrate back to bed. Don't worry, it's just pot. This is where things get exciting. I roll a joint, take a puff, and suddenly the thoughts slow themselves. Suddenly, I'm not thinking about my calorie count or that one thing my boss said to me. Suddenly, I'm not rubbing out knots in my chest. Suddenly, I feel neurotypical. I have this weird problem. Well, I have a few, but I've had this specific problem my entire life. I remember going to the doctor and my mom saying that I had strange obsessions over food. And not in the cute, oh my God, I love fries kind of way. It was deeper than that. Obsessive. Say we had ice cream sandwiches, the perfect form of handheld ice cream. I would not be able to stop thinking about them until they were all gone. Say Mom bought snack-sized Cheetos for our lunches, as she often did. I would have this unscratchable itch for those nasty little bastards until I knew there were none left. I would wake up in the night and have those motherfucking Cheetos on my mind. You think they make the bag so noisy to shame us from night eating? But honestly, it became my soundtrack. I wake up covered in orange dust. This cues a cute shame spiral I spend the rest of the day trying to get out of. Just in time to come home to my mega-loaded pantry for round 2, baby. This happened routinely from ages 9 to 17. That being said, I still have this habit in my fake adult life. Say I pack lunch and snacks for the day. They're gone by 11 a.m. easy. It's like I really need a cigarette, but the cigarette is a muffin. I recently made the conscious change to start buying things I felt I was allowed to have. No sugar-added fudge pops were a big win for a while until I learned I could fit 2 to 3 in my tiny tummy. Then the purpose of sugar-free sort of felt lost on me. You ever heard of the sexiest snack of them all? Pirate's Booty. Hold the fucking wheel. I am not sponsored by them, but after surgery, I'm almost certain I became 30% booty. You can eat handfuls of that shit, and it just dissolves immediately. This was a discovery I felt little to no shame about. No, I'm serious. You want to watch me do it? Strange thing is, could be anything. Not just junk food, but maybe food I felt limited access to. You know how when you aren't allowed to have something, how that makes you want it oh so much more? This does not go without humiliation. The weird thing about, bear with me while I drop a hot button topic, eating disorders. Well, the weird thing about them is that they're not always a 24-hour, 7-day-a-week type of thing. They can be triggered. And suddenly, out of the blue, you're back in the hole. Have you ever heard the term binge eating disorder? Hideous name and truly not acknowledged by the public as a real eating disorder. Unbeknownst to most, binge eating disorder, or BED, is the most common eating disorder and the least talked about. I've realized that eating disorders aren't acknowledged by the public unless they're visible. That's why we hear about rail thin people suffering from anorexia, but never the average sized person. People with BED may eat a lot of food in a short period of time, even if they're not hungry. Emotional stress or de-stress often plays a role in what might trigger a period of binge eating. Now, why do we overeat, you may ask? There's rarely a reason. It's been said that people overeat to avoid feelings of discomfort and isolation, but those are your textbook answers and give me little to no thrill. I believe it's so much more complicated than that. For instance, I don't always binge eat, but when I do, it is mindless and robotic, almost as if I have like alien hand syndrome. I cannot stop myself, regardless of pain of fullness or conscious effort. Other times, my eating disorders have manifested in tiny little odd food habits. I have this really weird routine when I eat popcorn. You see, I get myself a bowl of popcorn, like one does when the snack itch cometh, and then I get myself a cup. I then proceed to bite the crunchy part off the fluffy part and put the fluffy part in a cup. This is so when I'm done, I can eat all the fluffy parts together. I have been doing this chaotic bullshit since I was a child. I don't know if it's a control tactic or a texture thing, but I never thought it'd be something I'd share with a large group of people. I am deeply aware of how weird it is. Another, when I eat a hamburger, I have to eat it meat first, bun last. I do it any other way, I find myself feeling overwhelmed. Yes, eating a hamburger like a human being makes me eat too fast. And the speed of which one eats, I believe, heavily affects the satisfaction level of the meal. Now, this is not a scientific fact, merely an opinion. Speed eating is habitual. So once you fall into the practice of scarfing down your meals, it's almost impossible to break that practice. I found myself documenting the weird little food habits I carry with me daily. Because of this, I can pinpoint almost exactly where my food habits went entirely south. Trauma's a fun word, isn't it? It was a byproduct of pure disassociation. I was sexually abused from ages 11 to 14 by a neighbor. Became one of the only constants I could identify in my life. Middle school's a shitscape on fire for anyone as round as me, so maybe having a constant, as fucked up as it was, is why it took me so long to ask for help. Maybe I didn't understand it wasn't normal. And maybe the only attention I was receiving was a grooming trap. When a young person abuses another, you can only assume that they themselves have been abused. A routine developed. I would come over after school and we'd have a snack. When her grandmother was gone, trouble would ensue. Things would happen. I would protest, but they would happen anyway. Then when her grandmother got home, we would have dinner. It always tasted better than the food at my house. After dinner number 1 ended, I would go home and have a king-size dinner plate with my family. I always knew when I walked in the front door, home-cooked food would be waiting for me. I was a different person from house to house. I would forget that I had eaten. I wouldn't remember the events that had just ensued. My head was cleared. I've had an obscene problem with guilt my entire life. Could be the Catholic upbringing, maybe the closeted queerness. Either way, I was sick to my stomach with it. The shame swallowed me whole, and I finally confessed to my mother what had gone on with the girl next door. Notice how I said confessed like she's a goddamn priest? I swore to absolute secrecy. No one was to know, not even my dad. I spent the next few months trying to silence those confusing memories in my head. I had a therapist once tell me that childhood sexual abuse can be some of the most confusing types of childhood trauma, because usually it's the victim's first encounter with any intimacy of that nature. This, by default, creates a rather confusing precedent of the victim. When I came to my mother full of confusion, she explained it to me like this. That's something that some people do sometimes when they love each other, but not until they're much older. So I asked my neighbor. I've never fully admitted this, but I found myself back in that house, and the oh too familiar routine starts to take its course. And I'm standing there, backpack on, fighting stance on point, and I say, "Do you love me?" I didn't need an answer. I went to trauma therapy on top of the regular therapy I was already receiving. I did EMDR, eye movement desensitization and reprocessing. If you aren't familiar, they sit you across from a light beam that has lights that go side to side. You're instructed to follow them with your eyes. In addition to the eye movements, you hold buzzers that vibrate opposite each other. This engages both halves of the brain. EMDR is a psychotherapy that helps people heal from symptoms of emotional distress that are often the result of trauma. Super trippy stuff. I tried everything, with little to no success with that one. I went to CBT, I went to DBT, I tried CBD. I tried practically every medication approved for children. I processed the shit out of that trauma. And yet some days, feels like I've done none of the work. I find it odd that all of the habits that have followed me past recovery are almost all food related. Odd how sometimes we can smell a familiar smell and get transported back in time. Trauma triggers are like the time machine to every place you don't want to fucking go to. And after this, I became more aware of my body than ever. Its size, the way it looks when it moves. I didn't care that I had a perfectly able body to take me places. I wanted to wither away. Any diet regimen you think of, oh, have I tried it. It started as family diets. Mom would encourage us to turn in our snack-sized Doritos for perfectly cubed serving-sized containers of fresh fruit. This led to us getting a Wii Fit board and my sister and I doing MyFitnessPal as per mother's encouragement. Once that phased out, I was enrolled in Weight Watchers for the first time, not the last. I tried all of the diets and all of the regimens under the sun. No matter how I cut my intake, I was still inflating like a balloon. I once even had a dietitian and a personal trainer at the same time. Turns out you can actually gain 40 pounds from risperidol at age 16. Who knew? Not my doctors, I'll tell you that much. Now, I've always been a round child. Incredibly aerodynamic with my middle school slicked back greasy hair and my rolled up Sophie shorts. I could penetrate any crowd. It wasn't until round stopped being cute that I even realized I was being put on these diets. When you hit age 11, societal grooming starts and the war on the teen body begins, and you're left standing there in your neon limited 2 matching top and shorts looking around realizing, oh shit, I'm a little bit beefier than these other 6th graders. And that realization never leaves you. Mix this with a sprinkle of trauma and my anxiety shifted straight towards body awareness. Cue obsessive magazine flips, cue thinspo intake online, cue hiding in my dad's t-shirts, cue everything I did to shrink and change. You know, I remember the first time somebody noticed I'd lost weight and that feeling it gave me. One of pure confusion and alarm. I'm not gonna lie, I loved hearing it. I myself didn't realize I was becoming a skinny legend. I was battling a sort of eating disorder at the time, a fuck child between bulimia and anorexia. That was a nightmare. I remember my neighbor coming up to me and saying, "Hey kid, keep up whatever you're doing because you look good. Real slim." Cut to me that night sitting in front of chicken breast and sliced tomatoes that my dad prepared for me, having a full-blown panic attack, trying to calculate my calories from the little I'd consumed throughout the day, but was never really good at math. Fails 2 semesters, actually. I think this is probably when restrictive eating started for me. Obsessive thinspo intake online, a friend to eat carrots with at lunch when she was also told that veggies were free foods and didn't count towards your daily intake. I would forget my lunch at home and sustain myself on vegetables and nuts, which, when you really think about it, is pretty much what vegans do. When starving my demons became too hard, or more so their voices became too loud, I turned to binging. This felt safe and familiar. I'd binged my entire middle school experience. I would find myself stuffed to the brim, seeing what else I could fit in after an episode of 2 toaster strudels, cookies, chips and salsa, and a banana. Never forget about potassium. I am comatose! When the binge guilt hit, I would quickly run to the bathroom to retrieve what had settled in my stomach. Horrible habit, really. A lot of the medication I took as a child gave me side effects that affected my eating habits. I have chunks of memory gone forever from medicine I took as a kid. I remember brief flashes of time. For instance, a lot of the periods in my life are determined by what play I was presently doing at the time. I have zero memory of sophomore year of high school singing in the rain. I don't remember the 2 months of rehearsal. I don't remember playing the role I got an award for. Nothing. No recollection. I do remember spending some time in a treatment center. I'd been there once before in 8th grade and checked myself back in to work on some eating habits and unmet trauma. I digress. During my first run with Othello, I was on a medication that wasn't approved for children. Fun, right? Just wait, it gets worse. This pill made me so paranoid I started showing signs of psychosis. Meaning, I could not tell the difference between reality and my own view of it. This medication ended with me punching myself in the face on accident during a hearty anxiety attack. Generally, once I went to college, my meds mellowed out. This wasn't until I met with a doctor that said the medication I was on, in conjunction with the estrogen birth control I needed for my PCOS, I was considered high risk for stroke and heart attack. This was the first semester of my senior year of college. Perfect timing! The only way I can describe the effects of quitting one medication cold turkey and starting a new one was that my head was like a balloon with a string attached as if to not float away. I was walking around New York City having little to no control over my bodies or emotions, not really knowing what's going on, trying to stay above the water. It felt like somebody had slipped something in my drink that erased the ability for me to be in my body. And when you're an acting student, 9 out of 10 of your jobs are to be in your body. All right, ladies and gentlemen, it is all about tits and teeth. Chin up, shoulders back, reach up to the sky. Now we are going to roll down one vertebra at a time. Yes. Now, once you're finally bended at the waist, I want you to shake it out. Shake it out. Now, ladies and gentlemen, when you swing up, I want you to reach as high as the empire and make New York your bitch. Yes, that's right. Up, up, up. We now find ourselves descending into fetal position, a pose mightily uncomfortable for me as a large person. When you have extra fat, it gets in the way and makes it hard to breathe. I was the token big girl in my acting company, and I was aware of it the very first day when everyone kept asking if I was a master's student. I was 17, mind you. My year was filled with brandy beauties, with petite hips and high cheekbones. No one ever bullied me for being fat, but things were definitely different for me. I was once taking a scene study class and a male professor assigned me and a partner Fat Pig by Neil LaDouche. The woman character is fat and in a deeply loving relationship with a man who eventually dumps her because he cannot dare to be dating a fat person. Now, I was assigned this scene. Like someone says, hey, you're doing Fat Pig. This was probably the first time in my adult life that someone had categorized me as fat. I did the scene, swallowed my pride and crushed it, filled with shame the entire time. Later that semester, a teacher of mine showed a TED Talk on fat phobia, which I myself am totally guilty of. Fearing fat as though it's the worst thing you could be. When the teacher asked for feedback, everybody turned to the prime fatty of the class to ask for her 2 cents. I decided it was my turn to sit and listen. As people fumble over their words, sharing their compassion about how hard it must be, all the while checking in with me with their eyes to see if what they said rang true or offensive. Now that was bad. But one of the most striking incidents is when the girl from a grade above me asked if she could interview me for her project. Naturally, I said yes. I was honored to be the spotlight of her piece. What is it like to be a fat artist? I stand in shock as the jaws around us drop to the floor. I just want to know about the fat experience. In shock, I agree to meet her. Not knowing what to say, I'm in a tornado of emotions. I run into said girl at a party later that night, and she says, hey, did I offend you or something earlier? She seemed offended at my offense. I said, no, you didn't offend me, I'm just shocked. You see, I've never outwardly identified as a fat artist, nor had I ever outwardly identified as fat. And I didn't plan to unless that F was replaced with a PH. I lost weight over a relatively fast period of time. I was down 90 pounds in a year. That's like an entire toddler. A whole ass kid. Now don't get me wrong, I was sexy as hell before, but now I feel fresh. I'm not as tired as I once was. I can get around easier, my depression's better. Jeans fit me the way they're supposed to. Those closest to me at the time knew about the procedure, but not many more. It was solely a need-to-know basis. It was my business, and I wanted to keep it that way. Many people noticed the change, but not many said anything, mainly the physical one. Those brave enough to say anything had some rather dynamic responses. An old teacher I used to idolize stopped me in the hall. I'm so glad you're finally taking care of yourself. Now opportunities will finally come your way. I remember thinking, whoa, bitch, I just played Desdemona and Othello and you're talking opportunities? It's an experience you can only have if you were once big and became small, or were once small and became big. Being able to see the true character of others. People started treating me differently. Sexual beings coming out of the woodwork, asking when we're gonna chill. Strangers are a bit nicer. Deli guys flirt with you. The horror of catcalling becomes real. I was just dumped out of a 3.5-year relationship. Weighing in my heaviest, 275 crisp. I had just finished my first real play in a real New York theater. I was emotionally wrecked, but absolutely awakened. For the record, being dumped out of that relationship was one of the most shockingly freeing feelings I have ever had. To be released from what you think you want, only to be thrown headfirst into what you actually need. My mom proposed the surgery to me as a health option, considering I was always trying to slim down. Before being approved, I had to go to a psych evaluation.
All right, patient 416, what diets have you tried to help you lose weight?
Let's see, I've tried lean cuisine, South Beach diet, diet for people with PCOS, diet for pre-diabetics, intermittent fasting, food journals, apps, therapy. Didn't try Jenny Craig though, that shit's too fucking expensive.
Okay. How are your drug and alcohol habits?
I fibbed here and there, like you do. She just wanted to make sure I was mentally sound enough and doing it for the right reasons and capable of maintaining follow-up. Surprisingly, I passed. This is the first time I had hoped for something in a really long time. Before the procedure, I got everything out of my system that I wanted to eat. Chili's, Phillies, chips and salsa, Ben and Jerry's. I wanted to remember the texture, the taste in my mouth. So when I was crunching on ice chips and sipping protein drinks, I could imagine it were a cheesy burger. Once I had my first pre-op appointment, it finally felt real. The 4 days leading up to the procedure, I was on a clear, liquid, sugar-free diet. And when your body's used to consuming 4,000 calories a day and you're suddenly crunching ice and sipping chipping broth, it goes through shock. I had a migraine leading up to the procedure. My mom's a nurse at the hospital, so she handpicked the team that would do my surgery. I remember sitting there, being hooked up to an IV, holding my mother's hand as the nurse looks to me and says,
Ever had tequila before?
As I answered yes, a wave of inebriation passes over me. I am drugs. They wheel me through the double door, and I distantly remember dropping my mother's hand. They tell me to take 3 deep breaths. 1, 2, 3. I'm out. Next thing I remember is saying no, 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 over and over and over again. Turns out the doctor was telling me to wake up and open my eyes, and I was having none of it. Smack, I'm hit with a world of pain. I'm attached to a plethora of machines. IV, saline drip, blood pressure cuffs. These 2 compression straps are on my legs to ensure I wouldn't get blood clots. I'm officially freaked. Now, if you've never had this surgery, and I'm boldly assuming most of you have not, the amount of air they have to pump you with is obscene. So you will be passing gas out of both ends. You ever have hospital personnel applaud because you burped? I sure as shit have, and it's a great feeling to have a doctor that went to 16 years of medical school clap because you were ripping ass and taking names. I was sent home from the hospital on adequate hydration levels and good behavior. I spend the next week on the couch. You see, I have these pain pumps attached to my abdomen post-op that have these 2 skinny cords attached to these balls full of medication. Once the balls were completely out of meds, they were supposed to shrivel up, and then we were instructed to remove them at home. When I heard this, I protested. I said, no thank you, I would like these removed by a medical professional on heavy drugs. They did not comply. Once the balls were completely shriveled up, my mother overly enthusiastically volunteered to remove them. I lay on the couch as she pulls the cords from my flesh. I feel the ends of these tubes coming up my abdomen closer to freedom. I sit defeated and officially skeeved out. There is a horror film of this somewhere. And if you've ever experienced pain pumps, contact me after and I'll show you my movie. The recovery process was painful and lonely. I did meet another girl in drama school though who had the same procedure as me. She did all the diets, all the regimens. She could actually afford Jenny Craig. Spoiler alert, doesn't work. I was on a liquid/baby food diet for the first 2 months after the procedure. And when you aren't permitted to have solid food for months at a time, you realize how much we take it for granted. I would call my mom anytime I was about to eat something to see if what I was going to consume would put me back in progress. I'd call anytime I didn't gain a pound or lost a pound. My obsession became how much weight can I lose and how many rules can I actually follow? How slowly am I supposed to chew my food? Am I supposed to be setting a timer from 2 hours before I start eating or 2 hours from the time I finish eating? Do you think the doctor messed up my throat during the procedure? This was the first time in my life I had successfully committed to losing weight. 100%, no cheating, no cutting corners, no sugar. And I didn't want to mess it up. I've spent most of my formative years fearing fat as though it's the worst thing I could be. When I think the real thing that scared me was lack of control, lack of tact with myself. Some days I wish I could grab that adorably chubby 9-year-old and say, hey, it's okay. You can ask for help. Now I was gorgeous before I lost weight. And I like the way I look after. The only difference between the two versions is empathy with myself. I'm damn proud, to be honest. I feel good. Not every second, not every day, but right now, in this moment, I feel strong and able. I feel like I won. I haven't seen my surgeon since the procedure. I wonder if he'll recognize me. I miss his Nick Offerman demeanor. Dr. Brown?